Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I deal with muscular dystrophy since I was 6 years old. It's one of those conditions that just gets worse over time, and now at 33, I'm wheelchair bound. But honestly, I made my peace with it years ago. I decided to focus on the good things in my life instead of dwelling on what I can't control. The best thing in my life has always been my family, especially my younger sister. When I was first diagnosed, my mom sat her down and explained everything in kid terms. She asked my sister to look out for me, even though she was the younger one. Ever since then, she's been incredibly protective of me. We have this amazing bond that I wouldn't trade for anything. About 7 months ago, my sister came over to invite me to dinner at this fancy restaurant. Her husband was taking her and their little boy out, and she wanted me to come along. I told her that they should go as a family and have a nice time together, but she insisted that we really wanted me there and that her husband and son would love it if I came. I said yes. A few days later, they picked me up and we drove to the restaurant. The place was really nice, clean, well organized, gave off this warm feeling. I was enjoying myself until I noticed this loud, obnoxious voice coming from the table behind us. This woman was laughing way too loud, talking even louder, and using terrible language even though there were kids around. I didn't want to point it out to my family because I hoped they hadn't noticed. We ordered our food and waited about 30 minutes for it to arrive. When we started eating, we heard this loud thud behind us, followed by the most ear-piercing shriek from that same awful voice. I struggled to turn around in my wheelchair to see what happened. The woman was sitting on the floor, clutching her leg and screaming non-stop. She'd been heading to the bathroom and slammed her leg into one of the tables. I'll be honest, I didn't feel terrible about it. She'd been ruining everyone's evening with her behavior. But I also didn't think she deserved to get hurt just for being loud and rude. That feeling changed real quick. Her friends and some restaurant staff tried to help her up, but she claimed her leg was too injured to stand on. She said she couldn't even get up to sit in a chair. People started talking about calling an ambulance since she was making it sound so serious. Then she lifted her head, looked around the restaurant, and her eyes locked on me. It felt like a predator spotting prey. A chill went down my spine. Karen shouted at me to get her the chair I was sitting in. She pointed out that it had wheels and said she could move around with it for now. I asked what she was talking about. She was actually demanding my wheelchair from me. I wasn't sure until she repeated herself, this time adding some nasty comments about my disability. Before I could even respond, my sister jumped up and started yelling at Karen. She asked what the hell Karen had just said to me and called her insane. My sister made it clear that I wasn't giving Karen my wheelchair. She said she didn't care if Karen's leg was bruised, broken, or needed to be cut off. My sister told her she wasn't getting anything from us, especially not with that entitled attitude. When Karen fully processed what my sister said, she completely lost it. She instantly got up on both feet, including the supposedly injured one, and walked toward us. At first, she tried to grab my sister's hair, but my sister was sitting too far away. Then she realized I was right there, practically defenseless. She grabbed me by my shirt collar and yanked me out of my wheelchair with all her strength. I hit the floor hard, completely shocked. Before anyone could stop her, she started dragging my wheelchair toward her table while screaming like a maniac at me, my sister, and calling my brother-in-law good for nothing. Remember how I said my sister was raised to be protective of me? In high school, she took self-defense classes specifically to defend me from bullies. Those classes definitely paid off. In less than a second, she was standing right in front of Karen. The woman took a wild swing at my sister, but she dodged it somehow, pulled out her stun gun, and completely fried that horrible woman. That's when everyone's brains caught up to what was happening. People started separating us until the police and paramedics arrived. The whole fight part only lasted maybe 10 to 15 seconds, but it felt like forever. When the cops showed up, they tried to detain my sister first. But my brother-in-law is a lawyer, and he managed to calm them down and get them to check the security footage before doing anything they'd regret. By then my sister, her husband, and a waiter had helped me back into my wheelchair and moved me to a corner of the restaurant while everything got sorted out. After the police reviewed the footage, asking if we wanted to press charges seemed like a stupid question. Of course we did. Karen was taken away in an ambulance while the cops finished up with us. They said they'd contact us in the next few days for more investigation. I hugged my sister when they left, trying to calm her down. She was struggling to keep it together when the adrenaline wore off. Karen was charged and found guilty. She got 5 years in prison. We decided not to pursue a civil lawsuit because we just wanted to put the whole experience behind us. The thing that still gets me is how she went from claiming she couldn't stand up to literally jumping to her feet and attacking me the moment she got angry. Her injury was completely fake, just an excuse to try and steal my wheelchair from me. I grew up on a farm on the East Coast where hard work was a way of life and money was always tight. My parents divorced when I was young, and my stepmother turned out to be a complete nightmare. She was into drugs and ended up ruining my father's business. When I turned 16, I scraped together enough money to buy a car with a blown engine and rebuilt it myself in auto shop class. That car meant everything to me. After high school, I worked at an auto parts store to help make ends meet. When I was 18, my mother decided to move down south, and since living with my father and stepmother had become unbearable, I packed up what little I had and followed her. I barely had enough money to make the trip, but I knew it was the right choice. My mother and I ended up in a small trailer park hidden behind trees covered in Spanish moss, a few miles from the nearest town. We were barely scraping by, but we had each other. That Christmas, money was so tight that my mother couldn't afford to get me anything. Instead, I saved up enough to buy myself a cheap car stereo and got her a gold-plated necklace that she hung on her rearview mirror. When I gave it to her, she started crying. Even now, years later, she still gets emotional when we talk about it. The trailer park was small, only about 8 trailers total, and most of our neighbors were decent people. Most of them. The exception was the guy who lived right next to us. He was a military police officer who worked at a nearby base, and he was absolutely the worst neighbor you could imagine. This guy would throw loud parties that went on all night, leaving trash everywhere and refusing to clean it up. He and his buddies would walk around the park drunk, throwing beer bottles into people's yards, and generally acting like they owned the place. The worst part was when he actually cursed out our 90-year-old neighbor for asking him to clean up the beer bottles he'd thrown into her rose garden. Everyone in the neighborhood hated him. One spring, my car blew a head gasket, so I was out in our little driveway working on it. My mother's car was parked next to mine, and her boyfriend's truck was parked in front of the trailer, out of the way. I was determined to get my car running again because I needed it for work. Late one night while I was working under the hood, my neighbor's military buddies came stumbling through the park on one of their drinking rounds. They were throwing bottles everywhere, urinating on cars, and just being complete jerks. When they saw me working on my car, they came right over. The 3 of them started making fun of me, calling me a loser for working on what they called a piece of junk car. They mocked me for being poor and not being able to afford a real car. They also made fun of me for still living with my mother at 19, calling it pathetic. I tried to ignore them and keep working since I'm not a confrontational person and just wanted to get my car fixed. I asked them to let me work on my car because I needed to get it running. One of them responded by saying I could talk and asked what was wrong, calling me a poor boy who couldn't handle a little teasing. They kept making fun of me for being poor, for living with my mother, for driving an old car, everything they could think of. When they realized they weren't getting a reaction out of me, they eventually wandered off to continue their party at my neighbor's trailer. I packed up my tools and parts and took everything inside. I made sure all our doors were locked and went to bed, but I had a bad feeling about leaving our cars outside. The next morning I woke up to find all 3 of our cars with their doors wide open and completely ransacked. I was furious. My car stereo was gone, along with my mother's gold necklace and her boyfriend's expensive head-up display stereo system. We called the police immediately. The cop who showed up was about as helpful as a chocolate teapot. He looked around for maybe 5 minutes and then told us this really wasn't worth the department's time. He said these kinds of things happen in trailer parks. When I told him we knew who did it and that it was our neighbor and his friends, he asked if we had proof or video evidence or witnesses. When I said no, he told us there was nothing they could do and suggested we keep our cars locked next time. Something inside me snapped when he said that. Here we were, barely getting by, and someone had stolen the few nice things we had, including the necklace that meant so much to my mother. And the police didn't care at all. I told him I understood and that we would be sure to keep watch next time. After the cop left, I went inside and started thinking. No one was going to make my mother cry and get away with it. If the police weren't going to help us, I'd have to handle this myself. I walked over to my neighbor's trailer and pounded on the door. It was 7 in the morning, and he was clearly hungover when he answered. He asked what the hell I wanted, and I told him I wanted our stuff back. My stereo, my mother's necklace, and the stereo from the truck. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I told him his buddies had ransacked our cars the night before and that I knew he knew where our stuff was. He was still half drunk and let something slip when he said he didn't know where his friends had taken our junk. That was all I needed to hear. He just admitted his friends took our things. I told him he had 24 hours to get our stuff back or there was going to be a problem. He laughed in my face and asked what I was going to do about it. Then he slammed the door. That's when I knew it was on. That night, a massive storm rolled through the area. Heavy rain, thunder, the whole 9 yards. Perfect cover for what I had planned. At 1 in the morning, I put on some old clothes and thermal underwear, grabbed my tools, and headed out to his car. He had a nice new Nissan that looked way too pristine for someone who'd been messing with my family. I crawled under that car and went to work. Growing up with my father, who was a mechanic for many years, I'd learned a lot about cars, including how to disable them completely. I unbolted every nut I could reach, cut every wire I could find, punched holes in the gas tank, sliced the tires from the inside sidewalls where it wouldn't be obvious, and removed the oil pan entirely. I went absolutely crazy on that car. Thanks to the storm, he never heard a thing. After a few hours of systematic destruction, I threw all the parts I'd removed into a small pond just over the fence at the edge of the lot, where they'd never be found. Then I went back inside, threw my clothes in the wash, and went to bed with a smile on my face. The next morning I woke up to the beautiful sound of him screaming and punching his car. That car was never going to run again, and he knew it. He was so angry that he started breaking the windows and denting the body panels with his fists. Someone called the police and they came out to investigate. They asked around the neighborhood about what had happened. The cop asked my neighbor if he thought someone had vandalized his car, and my neighbor said he knew someone did because it was thousands of dollars in damage. The cop said that everyone they'd talked to said he had anger management issues and asked if it was possible he did this himself during a fit of rage. The old lady neighbor told the officer that he was always yelling and breaking things and that just last week he had thrown beer bottles at her roses. Another neighbor agreed, saying he had a real temper problem and that it wouldn't surprise them if he took it out on his own car. The lazy cops, who couldn't be bothered to investigate our break-in the day before, decided this was just him having anger issues and left without doing anything. But fate wasn't done with this guy yet. Since his car was totaled and had to be towed away, his wife started coming around more often. Except something seemed off. There was no kid with her like usual, and her voice sounded different from the window. I got suspicious and set up a webcam in my window that had a perfect view of his front door. After about a month of recording, I had compiled footage of multiple different women coming and going from his trailer. He was cheating on his wife with at least 3 different women that I could identify. One evening, I saw his actual wife drop by with their son when he wasn't home. I knocked on her door and asked if I could talk to her for a minute about her husband. She asked what about him, and I told her I thought she needed to see something. I invited her into our trailer and showed her the video footage. Her face went white, then red. She called him a lying, cheating piece of trash and said she knew something was going on. She immediately called her father and ordered a moving truck. Within hours, she was back with her dad and a U-Haul. I helped them load up everything she claimed was hers, including a 55-inch television, the refrigerator, and even the washer and dryer. She thanked me so much for showing her this and gave me $100 for my help. I told her she didn't need to pay me, but there was something else she should know. I told her about how he and his friends had stolen from us and how the police wouldn't help. She was shocked and told her dad what I had said. Her father gave me another $200 and shook my hand. He thanked me for doing the right thing and said people like me restored his faith in humanity. When my neighbor returned home drunk later that night, he walked into his trailer to find it completely empty, no furniture, no appliances, nothing. He completely lost it. He started kicking holes in the walls, smashing windows, and ripping the front door off its hinges. The 90-year-old neighbor called the police again. When they arrived and saw the destruction, they arrested him for property damage. But apparently he made such a scene at the police station that he ended up hitting an officer and got additional charges. The landlord who owned the trailer park told me later that my neighbor was on the hook for all the damages to the trailer plus back rent and that he was taking him to court. We ended up moving away shortly after, so I never found out exactly what happened to him, but I heard his life was pretty much ruined. With the money his wife's father gave me, I was able to replace my mother's necklace and buy new stereos for all 3 of our cars. When I told my mother's boyfriend the whole story, he was amazed and said he couldn't believe I had done all that for them. I told him nobody messes with my family and gets away with it. I'm a 29-year-old lighting technician working in Norway's entertainment industry. It's not the most stable career path. I had a steady job that covered only 50% of my income, and the rest came from seasonal work in television, theater, and events. The pay can be unpredictable, but I love what I do. 6 years ago, I met this woman who was 6 years older than me. We became friends and decided to be flatmates. For the first 3 years, everything was great. We lived in a nice apartment, split everything fairly, and got along well. She was working a regular job back then and was pretty down to earth. Then she got a new job in the entertainment industry too, but in a different department. Suddenly, everything changed. She started working with actors, filmmakers, and producers, and it went straight to her head. She began acting like she was too important to associate with regular people like me. She even told me once that I wasn't allowed to attend a party for television and theater workers because she might be there and didn't want to be seen with me. When our lease was up, we moved to a new place together and signed another 3-year lease. I thought things might go back to normal, but they only got worse. She basically took over the entire apartment. I spent most of my time in my bedroom while she used the living room like it was her personal space. She even slept on the couch most nights instead of using her own room. Despite this, I still paid half of everything: rent, utilities, groceries. When our second lease started approaching its end, I knew I had to get out. I've been saving money and working extra gigs, and my bank had finally approved me for a home loan. I was ready to buy my first apartment. I decided to be mature about it and have an honest conversation with her about my plans. I sat her down one evening and told her that I had been thinking about what to do once our lease was up. I explained that I was personally ready to buy my own place and that my bank had approved my loan application. Her face lit up immediately and she got excited. She started talking about how we should look at apartments together, going on about how she wouldn't live in an old one and that it needed to be new and modern with all the latest features. She kept talking about what we should look for in our new place. I was shocked. She actually thought I was planning to buy a place for both of us or that we'd buy something together. I had to interrupt her and clarify that I was looking for an apartment just for me. The excitement on her face instantly turned to anger. She asked what she was supposed to do then. Then she got nasty and told me it was fine because she made so much more money than me anyway. She said I would only be able to buy old crap while hers would be so much better because she had standards. I simply told her that was good for her and got up and walked away. She was fuming because I didn't give her the fight or dramatic reaction she was clearly expecting. A month later, I had successfully bought my first apartment. It's small and was built in the 1950s, but it's mine. Every payment I make goes toward building my own future instead of just paying someone else's mortgage. The feeling of having my own space was incredible. She saw some pictures of my new place that I posted online. She came up to me and started making comments about how ugly and old my apartment was. She told me she was going to live so much better than me when she found her new apartment. I told her that was her choice, but I had heard she was planning to spend $1,500 a month to rent some high-fashion apartment. I pointed out that this was literally throwing money out the window, especially since she kept saying she wanted to buy her own place as soon as possible. I continued explaining that my apartment might be small and old, but my total monthly cost was $1,000 with everything included. Most of that money goes into my own property, which will only increase in value. I told her it had already gone up by $50,000 in just 1.5 years. I explained that this was my starter home and that once I was ready, I could sell it and buy something bigger. I said it was the smartest way to save money, in my opinion. Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. First shock, then confusion, then anger. She insisted that she was still going to live better than me. I looked at her with the most neutral expression I could manage and told her that was good for her. Then I walked away while she stood there looking like her head was about to explode. That was over a year ago. She's still renting that expensive apartment and occasionally sends me messages about how amazing her life is. I don't bother replying anymore. Meanwhile, my little apartment has continued to increase in value, and I've been able to save even more money for my next property purchase. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.